It's me, not you, Johnny.
So Benna Chang, Director of Intergovernmental Relations. I'm here with Julia Cooper from Finance, who can talk more about private activity bonds.
Okay, I'm starting to lose my voice, so hopefully I can do this quickly. So generally when the city issues bonds, governmental bonds, when they're building a facility that has a governmental purpose, like City Hall, fire station, library, those bonds are issued on a tax-exempt basis. So that means the interest that the bondholders get is exempt from federal income tax. So that means the U.S. Treasury is getting less money. So generally the IRS doesn't like those types of bonds because that means they get less money in. So over the course of time, they've set in place a number of regulations that kind of limit what government agencies can do with those facilities once they've been constructed. So those are called the private activity regulations, and they generally restrict what we can do. And so, for example, in this building, we lease space to the federal government in the patent office. Leasing to the federal government is considered a private use. So we had to do a complete tax analysis to allow them to lease this space. So what Councilmember Khamis has put forward is to have some legislation sponsored in Washington, D.C. that would look at modifying those private activity regulations, which would give us more flexibility with, especially around the issue of parks and community centers and how we might leverage those in a way that essentially opened up those private activity regs so we wouldn't be so constrained by the rules about the types of agreements we have to enter into in order to have others operate those facilities for us. So most notably, we've been constrained, particularly like with the golf courses, with respect to the types of contracts we can enter into that don't necessarily create the operator to have a profit incentive because they can't have that. So therefore, that limits the number of vendors that are interested in operating those facilities for us. Then in turn, we might not necessarily be generating sufficient revenue in order to maintain and operate those facilities as originally intended. So all the power to Councilmember Khamis. I can tell you this is a very difficult needle to move. In December, when the Congress was going through the entire Tax Reform Act, at one point during the month of November and December, on the table was the elimination of the private activity exception for like airports and multifamily housing revenue bonds. That eventually came off of the table, thank goodness. But so that's kind of the air of where Congress is. But I do commend Councilmember Khamis for giving it a good try to see if we could move that needle, because it would clearly benefit a lot of local communities across the country.
That makes complete sense. Thank you. And I'll move to approve.
I don't get to approve my own thing? No. All right.
I'll file a substitute. Well, hopefully we'll be able to persuade a Republican Congress. We'll just ask Councilman Khamis to change his party designation while we're lobbying this.
Could be a negotiation.
Councilman Khamis, did you want to speak on this item?
Honestly, I just wanted to explain it. I think you did a much better job at explaining it than I did, and I appreciate Congressional Rep. Anna Eshoo for working with my staff and the mayor's staff. I also want to thank him because we kind of brainstormed about this for a while, and it took us months to get this actually sponsored by Anna Eshoo, and we want to thank her for taking it up as well, and hope her colleagues will sign on with her. So if you have relationships with any other congressional representatives, I urge you to do this. It'll help out not just our city, but a lot of the municipalities in the United States. So thank you.
Okay, let's vote. All right, we're now done with the consent agenda. Here we go.